Israel offered a chance for the terrorists that are stuck in the tunnels of Rafah in the Gaza Strip to surrender, but Hamas spoke for them, saying they will not surrender, and also addressed the terrorists directly, telling them, "We do not have in our lexicon the word surrender." The IDF responded by destroying 4 terror tunnels inside the Yellow Line and eliminated dozens of terrorists. The IDF even announced that it has completed its mission on the Yellow Line in the area of Khan Yunis, freeing up engineering forces for other areas. And meanwhile, Hamas returned the remains of Hadar Goldin, which were held in Gaza for 11 years, as reports emerged for the first time that Israeli Navy Shayetet 13 commandos also operated underground in Rafah, in the tunnel where Goldin was located, and found his personal weapon, returning it to his family. Additionally, there was evidence that Hamas's shadow unit terrorists were buried in the tunnel, including the body of the top terrorist, the Rafah brigade commander, after he was eliminated. And in related news, the Americans are pressuring Israel to begin moving to stage 2 of the ceasefire agreement following the return of Hadar Goldin. Circling back to the terrorists that are trapped in the tunnels underneath Rafah, Trump and its administration and the special envoy Jared Kushner will discuss the situation with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu this week, with the possibility of exile to a third country reportedly on this agenda. So we have a report about a new real estate empire that is being built in the Gaza Strip by Qatar and by Egypt, and the New York Times has warned that the next war between Israel and Iran is only a matter of time. And despite the crushing drought in Iran that is forcing the government to contemplate evacuating the capital city of Tehran, the Ayatollah regime is rebuilding its capability to build ballistic missiles as well as its nuclear program. And accusations have also surfaced that someone is stealing Iran's rain clouds. And we'll tell you more about that. And speaking of Iran, there are also reports that Hezbollah commanders have had plastic surgeries in Iran to evade the IDF, while the United States is pressuring Hezbollah from another direction, and the IDF assesses that the Lebanese National Army does not have the ability or the motivation to confront the terrorist organization Hezbollah. On the diplomatic front, Israel is insisting that Turkey not send troops to be part of the International Stabilization Force in Gaza. And Defense Minister Katz went so far as to tell President Erdogan that he will see Gaza only through binoculars. And finally, the top leadership of the BBC resigned this week under pressure from criticism over the way that a speech by President Donald Trump was edited to make him look bad, as well as the biased coverage of the war in Gaza and other controversies. So welcome to Boots on the Ground. I'm your host, Yair Pinto, bringing you the whole truth about what is happening here in Israel. So the New York Times published a story this week that concluded with a prediction that the next war between Israel and Iran is only a matter of time, because Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile programs were severely damaged but not knocked out entirely, and Israel will have to hit them again to prevent a more serious threat from developing. And according to the Israeli sources, Iran's stockpile of highly enriched uranium, enough for about 11 bombs, was moved to a hiding space and is not buried under the rubble of Fordo, Isfahan, and Natanz, as the IAEA believes. Meanwhile, repair and reconstruction work has been observed around the clock at the industrial facilities that are related to Iran's ballistic missile program. While the Ayatollah regime is spending all of its time and money trying to build weapons of mass destruction, the Iranian people are suffering through one of the worst environmental disasters on this planet. The years-long drought in the country has forced the government to seriously contemplate evacuating the capital city of Tehran, which is situated in the middle of a district where nearly 15 million people live. As I've said before in these reports, I don't know where these millions of people can evacuate to, because most of Iran's other cities are also facing water shortages. And here at TBN Israel, we'll be keeping a close eye on all of this. And meanwhile, in the Gaza Strip, the IDF forces that are operating in the Khan Yunis area destroyed 4 underground routes and dozens of other terrorist infrastructures belonging to Hamas. Many weapons and stockpiles of ammunition were also found and demolished during this operation. And the IDF continues to carry out clearing operations in the area under its control east of the Yellow Line in order to set the stage for a return to security in southern Israel. And on the diplomatic front, according to a Palestinian source that is involved in the negotiations, it is specifically Turkey that is applying the main pressure on Hamas to stay on track with the ceasefire plan, and the United States is supporting Turkey in this position. That's the good news, but when it comes to some bad news for Israel, this is what it is, because America is putting pressure on Israel, and that includes pressure to allow a safe passage for 150 trapped terrorists in Rafah in the Gaza Strip back to the Gazan side for the second phase of the ceasefire deal to begin. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is scheduled to discuss this situation with the Trump administration envoy Jared Kushner this week. One idea that reportedly is being floated is for these terrorists to be exiled to a third country, but so far no one is willing to take them in. And another idea being suggested by the United States and Turkey is that these terrorists will commit not to return to terror activities, hand over their weapons, and receive a pardon from Israel. And in a related story, a Qatari aid shipment that entered Gaza, coordinated with an Egyptian group, revealed broad economic political cooperation between Cairo and Doha aimed at establishing joint influence in the Strip's reconstruction process. But Qatar and Egypt are not the only outside powers that are trying to increase their foothold in the Gaza Strip. Turkey is also pressuring hard to be part of the multinational stabilization force that is supposed to be the key element in phase 2 of the ceasefire plan. However, the spokeswoman for the Prime Minister's office clarified that Jerusalem opposes the deployment of Turkish soldiers as part of a multinational force in the Gaza Strip, as Turkey is not a partner to any political or security move with Israel. In the northern arena, after a wave of extensive strikes against Hezbollah targets, Saudi reports say that senior members of the terrorist organization are trying to hide from the IDF and have even underwent plastic surgeries to disguise their faces. And according to the report, these operatives were transferred to Iraq and Iran and were operated under the supervision of the Revolutionary Guards. And elsewhere, the United States Treasury exposed a network of money and transfers through money changers and foreign exchange companies in Lebanon, and by 2025, hundreds of millions of dollars were transferred from Iran to Hezbollah. That probably goes a long way towards explaining why the Lebanese National Army has had so little success in dismantling Hezbollah, but pressure on the Lebanese government to increase its actions against Hezbollah is expected to grow due to the dissatisfaction with the pace of the disarmament and the handling of the organization's terrorist infrastructure. Because of the Lebanese army's avoidance, the IDF decided to strike and to remove the threat, even when it involved hubs far from the border. And finally, following accusations of severe and systematic bias in coverage, Tim Davie announced on Sunday that he's resigning as the Director General of the BBC. Deborah Turness, the corporation's new CEO, also resigned, and Davie clarified that his departure is his personal decision, but it comes as the BBC prepares to apologize for its coverage of President Donald Trump and other issues, including the war in the Gaza Strip. So we have a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report, bringing you the whole truth about what's happening in Israel and the continuing battle against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shia militias in Iraq, and all the other armed groups in this region that are operating under the control of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. So before we start, I want to introduce you to our partner for today's video, Leket. They're making a real difference in the land of Israel, and we'll tell you more about this organization later in this report. Also, I want to ask you to keep spreading the truth. Thanks to you, every day the lies of the evil, of that's whatever happening around the world against Israel, are being shattered because you help us grow and share this information with more people. So please, share, leave a like, leave a comment, and most importantly, hit the subscribe button so you never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. Now, we'll start today's report with a look at recent events in the Gaza Strip. The IDF forces from Division 36, together with the Yalam fighters, have operated in recent weeks in the Khan Yunis area to locate and to destroy terrorist infrastructure, and during the operation, 4 underground routes and dozens of structures that are used by terrorists were destroyed. It was also announced on Sunday that after 2 months of fighting, the mission of the Harel Brigade forces in the Yellow Line area in Khan Yunis in the Gaza Strip was completed. And during the fighting, the forces eliminated dozens of terrorists who posed a threat to them in the area and also destroyed hundreds of above and underground terrorist infrastructure. In one of the activities, the forces located a Hamas tear tunnel and a shaft in the Yellow Line area in Khan Yunis. In addition, dozens of weapons were located, including Hamas observation equipment. So, the IDF statement that the Southern Command forces continue to operate in the Yellow Line area to remove any immediate threat to our forces and to the citizens of the State of Israel. In related news, the Hamas terrorist organization announced recently that it had located the remains of Hadar Goldin in Rafah, and on Sunday evening, they returned these remains over to the Red Cross, and subsequently they were delivered to Israel, where an examination of them determined that they were actually Goldin's remains. So, it was also reported that during their search of the remains of Goldin, they also found the remains of 6 terrorists who belonged to the organization's military wing and were eliminated in circumstances that were unclear. The sources hinted that these were shadow unit operatives who apparently oversaw the site in the Yibina camp in the city in the southern parts of the Gaza Strip and lost their lives during this war. However, we need to remember that Hamas is an organization with some special units whose job is to enforce internal discipline, so to speak, so that these terrorists whose remains were found in the tunnel near the remains of Goldin might have lost their lives in some kind of an internal turf war. We'll probably never know the full story and what happened at that location, but what we do know is that while Hamas terrorists pretended to be searching and knew in advance where the captive fallen was held, Shayetet 13 commandos and other special forces of the IDF operated along an underground route in Rafah to locate the body of Lieutenant Hadar Goldin. This was first revealed on Sunday evening in the Israeli media, and the special operations carried out during Division 162nd activities to take control of the area were prolonged and included a long stay and operations based on intelligence information. In addition, it was reported that Goldin's personal weapon, which was returned to his family, was found near the remains of the Rafah Brigadier Commander Muhammad Sabana after he was eliminated in the underground route near the European hospital in Khan Yunis alongside Muhammad Sinwar. Now that Goldin's remains have also been returned to the family, his weapon will be sent to a museum as part of an exhibit dedicated to telling his story and the stories of other hostages. Speaking of stories, the story of around 150 Hamas terrorists that are trapped in tunnels in 2 areas in the Khan Yunis area and in the Rafah area is something that could accompany us in additional areas throughout the entire period of the agreements. While we are indeed in the final stage of Phase A, in which Hamas terrorists are supposed to release all the hostages who are in their possession within 72 hours, here we are almost 1 month later and the process is still not complete. All the living hostages were released within a period of 3 hours during the American president's visit to the country, but since then, every day or every 2 or 3 days, the remains of the fallen have been released in small groups, and now there are still 5 individuals, 4 Israelis and 1 foreign worker who are unaccounted for. As of yesterday afternoon, it was clear to the defense establishment that in light of the pressure applied, the body of Hadar Goldin had been found, and Hamas even made sure to document this event, but since then, there have been no announcement of other remains to be released. Hamas constantly tries to link this moving event and exploits it to the fullest in order to secure the release of the terrorists in the tunnels, despite the fact that 3 IDF soldiers lost their lives and several others were wounded in recent weeks from attacks by these terrorists. Hamas wants their release, and the mediators, led by the United States, want it as well, so as not to disrupt the pace of the ceasefire agreement. However, Israeli officials have said that they must not give into this pressure. Instead, Israeli officials say that they are working on an alternative plan that would encourage the trapped terrorists to surrender and be taken for questioning, but this common sense proposal is seen by Hamas as an insult to their so-called honor, and they are refusing it so far. The Americans see the terrorists remaining in the Rafah tunnels as a focal point of tension that led to 2 severe escalations and undermined the ceasefire agreement, and they want to defuse this situation so the overall plan can move forward. And senior American officials say that the Trump administration also conveyed to Israel the message that this event can be turned into a kind of pilot project to disarm Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Senior American officials say that the primary direction now for resolving the Rafah terrorist crisis is their temporary exile to a third country. However, according to them, a country willing to receive these terrorists has not yet been found. And according to the outline that is being formulated by the United States and by Turkey, the terrorists in Rafah will commit not to return to terror, hand over their weapons, and receive a pardon from Israel. They will then be restricted to a third country for a period of several years, the length of which is still being negotiated. If these terrorists do not return to terror, they will be able to return to Gaza at the end of the exile period. And during the talks between the United States and Israel, the Americans emphasized that if Israel does not agree to this outline and insists on eliminating or arresting these terrorists, it will send a message to all the other Hamas members in the Gaza Strip that they have no option other than to return to war, because in any case Israel will not grant them pardon, even if they lay down their arms and surrender. I'm very curious, what do you think about all of this? Let me know in the comments section. And for their part, Hamas's military wing issued a statement on Sunday morning addressing this issue directly for the first time. In their statement, they declared that Israel bears full responsibility for the clashes with our fighters in Rafah, who are defending themselves inside an area under its control. It must be made clear to the enemy that the principle of surrender and submitting to the enemy does not exist in the lexicon of the Al-Qassam brigades, according to Hamas officials. The source also noted that Hamas has a certain difficulty in returning some of the 4 captive fallen and the remains that are in his hands, but he also said that it is not Hamas's fault. And to make a brief comment of my own, we know that the Hamas terrorist organization always lies, and so there's nothing surprising in this comment. And right now, in Gaza, there are still the remains of 4 fallen captives: police officer Ran Gueli, Meni Godard, and Dror Or from Kibbutz Be'eri, as well as Soditak Rehan Katak, a Thai citizen who was abducted from the Be'eri area. So guys, keep spreading the truth, share and follow us. Most importantly, don't forget to hit this subscribe button so that you remain tuned to what's happening in Israel, boots on the ground style. Now, speaking of truth, I want to share a true story with all of you about an ordinary Israeli man who is just one of the many heroes who rose to this difficult occasion. On October 7th, Yossi, a farmer near the Gaza border, woke up to terror. He and his wife grabbed their 4 little boys and hid in a bomb shelter as armed terrorists stormed their community. They survived, but the aftermath was devastating. His fields were abandoned, crops left to rot, and like so many others, he did not know how or if he will recover. But here's what struck me the most. Yossi didn't give up. Instead, he gave back. He worked with Leket Israel, donating what produce that he could to help others, because in his words, we just wanted to live peaceful lives. Leket Israel stepped in, as they've done with so many farmers. They're rescuing surplus food, supporting devastated communities and feeding over 450,000 Israelis every single week. The Bible says, when you reap the harvest of your land, leave some for the poor and the foreigner. This is in Leviticus 19. You can help. Go to blesstheharvest.org and donate. Let's stand together with Yossi and with Israel. Again, that's blesstheharvest.org. Now, we are shifting the focus to the northern arena. The Saudi channel Al Hadad reported on Sunday evening that dozens of senior Hezbollah officials underwent plastic surgeries to disguise their faces as a precaution against IDF strikes. The sources quoted in the report noted that those officials had been attacked and wounded but survived the strikes, and now they fear further attacks. However, commanders in the terrorist organization who were not wounded also underwent plastic surgeries. Those commanders and the wounded left Lebanon for Iraq and Iran, where the surgeries were performed under the supervision of the Revolutionary Guards. Only wounded who could not be transferred were operated in Lebanon in clinics that belonged to Hezbollah. Will this tactic succeed? Will the new faces protect these evil Hezbollah terrorists from being targeted by the IDF? Let me know what you think in the comment section. And moving on, last week, the IDF spokesperson in Arabic, Colonel Avichai Aderi, issued evacuation warnings not seen since September 18 for 5 villages in southern Lebanon: El Taibeh, Aita El Jabal, Tair Deba, Zutar, El Sarkiya, and Dunin. In these messages, the IDF warned that it would soon strike to deal with Hezbollah's attempts to rebuild, and residents in areas marked in red on the map were asked to evacuate. After the evacuation warnings, the IDF forces completed a wave of strikes on Hezbollah targets in these villages, and the military clarified that the wave of strikes was broader than usual. At the end of the strikes, which lasted about 4 hours, the IDF spokesperson stated that the Air Force completed a wave of strikes on terror infrastructure and on weapons depots of the Radwan commando forces in southern Lebanon. The statement went on to say that the terrorist organization continues attempts to rebuild terror infrastructure in southern Lebanon, focusing on restoring the unit's capabilities with the aim of harming the state of Israel. And prior to the strikes, steps were taken to minimize harm to civilians, including evacuating the population using precision munitions, aerial surveillance, and additional intelligence information. The depots that were struck were located in the heart of the civilian population and constitute another example of Hezbollah's cynical use of Lebanese civilians as human shields. The next day, explosions again thundered across the border as media outlets in Lebanon reported that a UAV strike on a vehicle in Binchbel in the south of the country in which 7 people were wounded, and another strike in Lida in which a bulldozer was hit. It was also reported that an Israeli UAV struck in the village of Rashaya El Wadi in El Bekaa region in eastern Lebanon, and in parallel with all of these reports, Lebanon is trying to signal that the diplomatic track is still alive and that American mediation efforts to stabilize the arrangement continue. In an attempt to expedite the process of disarming Hezbollah and assist the Lebanese state in dealing with the terrorist organization, the United States Department of the Treasury imposed sanctions on 3 entities that helped transfer tens of millions of dollars from Iran to Hezbollah during 2025, exploiting money changers in Lebanon's cash-based financial sector. This is according to a statement from the United States Treasury, which went on to say that since January 2025, the Quds Force of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps has transferred over $1 billion to Hezbollah, mainly through money exchange companies. The Treasury revealed that funds are also transferred through covert businesses and business transactions by Hezbollah's financial teams, including via the sale of Iranian oil and other products into Lebanon through licensed and unlicensed money changers. unlicensed cash exchange business and companies that do not conduct sufficient checks on their customers enable Hezbollah to exploit Lebanon's cash-based economy to launder illicit money. Furthermore, between September 2024 and February 2025, Osma Jaber, a Hezbollah member, collected or converted tens of millions of dollars to several money brokers and exchange companies. Some are owned or linked to Hezbollah members. Jaber works directly with the Lebanese money changers and the foreign exchange companies and personally collects money for Hezbollah. John K. Hurley, the Deputy Secretary of the Treasury for Terrorism and Financial Intelligence, said that Lebanon has an opportunity to be free, prosperous, and also secure, but this can only occur if Hezbollah is completely neutralized and severed from Iran's funding and from Iran's control. We will work with the Lebanese partners to create a strong economy that puts the interests of all the Lebanese citizens at the center. It is also important to remember that for years, law enforcement agencies in the West have warned of a massive narcotic trafficking empire in Latin America, in Africa, Europe, and in the United States, and this is funneling money to Hezbollah in Lebanon. This evil terrorist organization is also involved in delivering poison to millions of people all over the world, and they are also involved in other illegal activities, including the trafficking of human beings. I won't say more about this because you can easily find out more for yourself, so leave a comment on this video telling us what you think about all of this and what you know about Hezbollah. Now, getting back to the United States Treasury report, it also said that Hezbollah's ability to conduct financial transfers was severely damaged with the collapse of the Assad regime in Syria in December 2024, which for decades served as a key source of support and a bridge to Iran for Hezbollah. In addition, following the elimination of October 2024 of Hezbollah Unit 4400 Commander Muhammad Qasir, the head of Hezbollah's financial team, financial responsibility was divided amongst several individuals. New sanctions are being imposed on these individuals, and now all property and interests in property of the designated or blocked persons that are in the United States or in the possession or control of U.S. persons are blocked and must be reported to the OFAC. In addition, any entity owned directly or indirectly, individually, or in an aggregate 50% or more by one or more blocked persons is also being blocked, unless authorized by the general or specific license that is issued by the OFAC or exempt. OFAC regulations generally prohibit all transactions by the United States persons or within or transmitting the United States that involved property or interest in property of blocked persons. It is important to remember that the IDF has operated quite a bit in this realm in the last few years, and operations was carried out to harm Hezbollah's financial capability, including during Operation Northern Arrows, when branches of Hezbollah's bank, El Qard El Hassan, were struck, damaging Hezbollah's cash holdings and also harming the bank's computer systems. Subsequently, the Air Force conducted a series of eliminations of senior figures in the smuggling access of funds and cash that transferred from Iran to Lebanon. But it seems that all the actions failed to halt the flood of money that Iran transfers to the terrorist organization in the north of Israel. Pressure on the Lebanese government to step up its actions against Hezbollah is expected to increase due to dissatisfaction with the pace of dismantlement and the handling of the organization's terrorist infrastructure. Last Thursday, there was a rise in the scope of strikes, mainly in populated areas, which increased concerns about renewed confrontation with Hezbollah. There was also some concerns expressed that these strikes damaged civilian areas, but Hezbollah deliberately placed its operations within these civilian areas in order to use these civilians as human shields. And furthermore, according to the IDF, the Lebanese army does not enter private compounds and civilian areas and therefore avoids dealing with these infrastructures. And as a result, the IDF decided to strike and to remove the threat. even when it involves hubs far from the border with Israel. And despite the foot dragging by the Lebanese army, which declares that by the end of the year it will complete all actions against Hezbollah, the IDF doubts their ability to implement this in practice. So the concern in Lebanon is that a direct confrontation with Hezbollah could reignite a civil war in the country. In this context, the IDF notes that some members of the Lebanese army are Shiites close to Hezbollah and even cooperate with it. And beyond that, despite the decline in economic support from Iran, Hezbollah still has far more money, weapons, and equipment than the Lebanese army itself. Since the change of the government, the pace of weapon smuggling from Iran through Syria to Lebanon has significantly decreased, but the organization still manages to smuggle weapons even if in a smaller quantity. And meanwhile, in Israel's northern border and their communities, daily life continues, but the residents follow the developments across the border with concern, as the echoes of explosions from IDF strikes in Lebanon are clearly heard. We will continue to bring you the whole truth about what's happening in Israel, and as always, we invite you to be part of the team by sharing our content with as many people as possible. You can also click the like button, leave a comment, and hit the subscribe button. And now, we are switching our focus to the Gaza Strip and some of the diplomatic developments that are related to the situation on the ground. The spokeswoman for the Prime Minister's office, Shosh Badrosian, announced on Sunday in a briefing to journalists that Israel will not agree to the deployment of Turkish soldiers in Gaza as part of a future multinational force. Her remarks come amidst reports of international efforts to establish a temporary transitional mechanism in the Gaza Strip after the fighting ends. At the same time, a report in the United States revealed that former British Prime Minister Tony Blair may head the temporary administration in Gaza after the war. According to the plan, Blair will lead the Gaza International Transitional Authority, a body intended to serve as a temporary political and legal authority in the Gaza Strip for about 5 years, with the support of Arab states and the United Nations. The plan, formulated together with the Trump administration and the envoy of Donald Trump, Jared Kushner, and other American advisors, includes establishing a headquarters in El Arish in northern Sinai in Egypt, and later moving to Gaza, accompanied by a multinational force. According to the reports, Turkey was supposed to take part in this force, but Israel vehemently opposes this. And here, at TBN Israel, we will continue to press for the truth, so hit the subscribe button and help us. Now, switching our focus to Iran. Doubts are growing around the declaration by the United States President Donald Trump that the Israeli and the American strikes during the 12-day war in June completely destroyed Tehran's nuclear program. According to officials and regional analysts that are cited in the New York Times, the damage caused to Iran is indeed significant, but far from complete destruction, and the fear in the Middle East is that the next confrontation between Israel and Iran is only a matter of time. According to assessments, Tehran retains a stockpile of enriched uranium that is sufficient to produce 11 nuclear bombs, while Iran claims that it was buried under the ruins of the strikes at Fordo, Isfahan, and Natanz, and the IAEA shares this view. Israeli officials told The Times that this stockpile was most likely moved to a hiding place before the strikes. Iran also continues to work on a new enrichment site called Mount Picasse, to which it refuses to grant access to any international inspectors. And in the meantime, a dangerous stalemate has formed, as there are no negotiations with Tehran regarding the nuclear program, no certainty about the status of the uranium, and no independent oversight. Ali Vaez, the Iran project director at the International Crisis Group, told The Times that missile factories in Iran are working around the clock. Next time they decide to respond, they hope to launch 2,000 missiles at once to flood Israel's defensive systems, not only 500 over 12 days, as was the case in June. According to him, in Israel, the previous campaign is seen as unfinished business, and they are ready to resume the fighting. Israel is closely monitoring the developments, and as reported then, security officials conveyed messages to China demanding the halt of shipments of components for ballistic missiles and the fuel that powers them, but Beijing continues trade, claiming that the material is not on the sanctions list. We should also remember that on the eve of the war, Iran held about 2,700 missiles. It fired around 500 at Israel and lost hundreds more to Israeli strikes. Now Jerusalem is assessing that it has replaced much of what was lost and has around 1,300 ballistic missiles that it can fire at Israel, and it is working hard to expand that arsenal ahead of another round of confrontation between the Jewish state and Iran. However, as the New York Times notes, Iran is more isolated from the West than ever. Key Arab states, including Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the United Arab Emirates, are strengthening their influence on Washington and on Trump, partly thanks to the economic ties and the cooperation around his plan for Gaza. Syria, which was previously Iran's strategic ally under the Assad regime that collapsed last year, is now trying to get closer to the United States. Within Iran itself, according to the Times, an internal debate is on its way as some senior officials seek to compromise with the Trump to prevent economic collapse, while others believe there is no way to negotiate with someone who withdrew from the previous agreement and bombed Iran in the midst of the negotiations. But according to Dvayez, both camps agree that another round with Israel is inevitable. He added that the state is doubling down on its preparations for a next round, hoping to create a new balance that erases the sense of Iranian weakness. Now, we will move to a report that proves what we have claimed here every day since October 7th, that we are almost alone in the media that is reporting the actual truth about what's happening here on the ground in Israel. Tim Davie, the editor-in-chief of the BBC network and the head of the news division, Deborah Turnes, resigned on Sunday following harsh criticism of deliberate bias and slanted coverage by the British broadcaster. Pressure on the senior officials to resign began and also intensified after an investigation was published in The Telegraph, which is another British newspaper, dealing with the network's deliberate bias in editing a speech made by the United States President Donald Trump several years ago, as well as the war in the Gaza Strip. In an email Dave sent to BBC employees, he wrote, "I have decided to leave the BBC after 20 years. This is entirely my decision, and I'm grateful to the chair and the board for their unwavering support throughout my tenure, including in recent days." Trump responded to Davie's resignation on his social media account on the Truth Social, writing, "The highest people at the BBC, including Tim Dave, the boss, were fired or resigned because they were caught trying to rig my excellent and perfect speech on January 6th. Thank you for the Telegraph for exposing these corrupt journalists. They are very dishonest people who try to get their hands on the presidential election. Above all else, they are from a foreign country, one that many call an ally. What a horrible thing for democracy." On the X account of Israel's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, a response was also published stating, "The resignation of the editor-in-chief underscores the deep bias that has characterized the BBC's coverage of Israel. For far too long, the BBC has spread disinformation that fueled anti-Semitism and radicalization, but it does not stop at the BBC. Too many media outlets promote politics under the guise of facts and amplify Hamas's false campaigns. It is time for real accountability to restore integrity to journalism. Therefore, it is important to pray for the truth and to help us every day. You can do this by sharing and also by praying, because this is a spiritual war, and the best thing to do in order to fight a spiritual war is to pray. So I call on all of you to understand what's happening in Israel and then to pray into it. This is a spiritual battle. It's not about Israel. It's not about the politics of this land. It's about good versus evil. It's about God's plan for your life and for the state of Israel and the nations around the world, like it's always been. So let's make it personal. Let's pray for the IDF soldiers that are fighting on multiple borders. Let's pray for the truth to come out, for good journalists to share what's happening on the ground in Israel. Let's pray for the safety of our crew at TBN Israel that are working day and night to bring you boots on the ground and the truth of what's happening here. Let's pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Let's pray for God's will to be done here on earth, in Israel, and everywhere else. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem, okay?
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.